Good morning. My name is Sara Forrest, and it is my pleasure to be your worship associate this morning. About 8 years ago, my husband and I were across the street with our children, playing at the splash pad in front of the library. When we first moved to Portland, we had gone to the First Unitarian downtown, but by this time in our lives, we hadn't been to church for years. Our lives had just become too busy and full with the parenting journey we'd begun. I remember walking across the street to read the signs and posters that were outside this beautiful and somewhat baffling pink church. I was excited to see that it was a Unitarian church, and I recall reading the signs and thinking, yes, I remember this. I like all that this has to say. When we got home, I even looked up the church online to see when services were. But then, of course, the rushing current of life carried us along, and we didn't fall through with visiting. When Myra, my daughter, started elementary school years later, she began to come home sharing some of the things she was hearing on the playground about God and church. And my husband and I realized maybe we need to provide a little more support in the area of the spiritual questioning. And I remembered this wonderful pink church with the signs out front. The signs that gave voice to what our family feels is important: love, inclusion, interdependence, and justice. And so we came. We sat right there in the back, and soon we were approached by Reverend Marcia, who greeted us with such warmth, who asked us our names and welcomed us into this space. As you know, we kept coming. And as our relationship to this congregation deepens, we continue to witness acts of generosity, commitment to social justice, inclusion, hospitality, and care, both for our congregant community and the community beyond these walls. From that service on, I could see that the words which were printed outside the building, those words were alive inside it. I have so much worry, so much anxiety and fear right now. People I love, the environment I cherish, the values I hold closest to my heart are under attack. Sometimes it feels like a tidal wave. It's easy to get consumed with the thoughts of, what can I do? Am I doing enough? What do I have to compromise? I personally can get so into my head with these worries that I feel unmoored, sometimes even helpless. But coming here helps me. And truly, I just want to share with you all the gratitude that I have for this spiritual community. Those dearly held values are embodied here in all of you, in the countless seen and unseen ways that you give of your time, talents, and presence. This spiritual house that we build together, this is where I can come to find resilience. This is where I can come to find hope. And I thank you all for that.
Our reading today is from Article 2, which is the new delineation of our Unitarian Universalist values. It reads, as Unitarian Universalists, we covenant, congregation to congregation and through our association, to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritage of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Inseparable from one another, these shared values are interdependence. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. With reverence for the great web of life and with humility, we acknowledge our place in it. We covenant to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation. We will create and nurture sustainable relationships of care and respect, mutuality and justice. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships. Pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. Justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregations, our association, and society at large. Transformation. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect. Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. And equity. We declare that every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities. When I was in seminary, my favorite professor, David Bumbaugh, spoke often about the fact that because Unitarian Universalists often didn't share beliefs about the existence of God or the afterlife, we didn't even share the same spiritual practices. And that meant that we were far more likely to be demographically similar, leading to my favorite but rather dated Unitarian Universalist joke: how can you tell a really diverse UU congregation? There are several different colors of Priuses in the parking lot. Over the last 15 years, we are working hard to make headway towards becoming a more demographically diverse tradition, and that is a good and important thing. But one thing that is and remains true is that because we don't share a common set of religious beliefs, we do share a common set of values. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have some different values or that we are in lockstep all the time. The lively conversations in the forum are probably proof of that. But I will say that the Pew Center, which does surveys on religion and public life and provides the most useful information on what people believe sorted by religious faith, did at some point recently publish a list of who approves of same-sex marriage by religious faith. And Unitarian Universalists were at the top of the scale with 94%. And among my colleagues, we kind of figured the other 6% just didn't understand the question. Folks may have differing opinions on the finer points of immigration policy, but as a faith, we believe that no human being is illegal. And we certainly believe that pulling a bunch of minors from their beds at 2 o'clock in the morning and loading them on a plane to send them to Guatemala, where some don't even have relatives, is cruel and horrific. We don't believe that ICE should stop a dad driving his kid to preschool and smash his window when he refuses to get out of the car until somebody can come get his child, who is a citizen. Other faith traditions have different reasons for their stances on immigration policy or abortion or same-sex marriage. But instead of a creed, we have a set of values that form the basis of our faith. Until a few years ago, that was in the form of the 7 and eventually 8 principles, which began with a belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Not just straight people, not just people on one side of an arbitrary border, but everyone. Sometimes that's a hard one. It can be hard to argue for the humanity of someone who was railed against other people. But I am comforted by the fact that while we have to accept the inherent worth and dignity of other people, we don't have to accept bad behavior. Hitler was horrific. We do not have to accept what he did. The only thing we need to do is acknowledge that he was a human being. And as such, even he deserves some level of dignity. I will confess, until 5 days ago, I had never heard of Charlie Kirk. I won't mourn him, but no one, no matter how reprehensible their views, deserves to be politically assassinated. And I believe this because I believe that the politically motivated murders of Minnesota House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband Mark are reprehensible. I'm angered by people like Utah Senator Mike Lee and the right-wing media, led by Donald Trump, who are saying that the left and the Democratic Party are responsible en masse for the murder of Charlie Kirk and that the country needs a civil war to destroy the Democratic Party. Time magazine reported, Charlie Kirk being assassinated is the American Reichstag fire, Matt Forney, a right-wing journalist and influencer, posted, referring to an arson attack on the German parliament in 1933 that the Nazis blamed on communists and used as a pretext to suspend a swath of civil liberties. He said, "It is time for a complete crackdown on the left. Every Democratic politician must be arrested and the party banned under RICO, Racketeering, Influenced, and Corrupt Organizations Act. Every libtard commentator must be shut down. They caused this." And in another post, Forney said, "The left must pay. Ban the Democratic Party, shut down CNN and MSNBC, military tribunals. If you are to the left of Lindsey Graham, you belong in prison. You caused this." They sure got quiet when they discovered that the shooter was from a nice Mormon Republican family and that he thought Charlie Kirk was too liberal. But did they walk anything back? No. Political assassinations, let me be clear, are absolutely not part of our values. Violence on any side is not part of our values. But as I would guess, the only religious organization in the country that actively includes support for inclusive democratic processes, which means voting, to run both our institution and society at large, we must advocate for fair and free elections that do not discount or discourage any citizen from voting. I've been really aware lately, amidst all the many, many horrific things going on in our country and our world, that none of our presidents, at least in my memory, none of our previous presidents, only claimed to be president of half the country. If a Republican lawmaker under a Democratic president or a Democratic lawmaker under a Republican president were killed in a politically motivated act, that president would show up and issue statements unequivocally condemning such an act. I'm reminded of the time that John Hinckley Jr. shot President Ronald Reagan. As he was whisked into surgery, Reagan joked to the medical team, "I sure hope you're all Republicans." "Mr. President, today we are all Republicans," responded Dr. Giordano, who was a Democrat. That's the world I want to see. It's not the world we're living in right now. So how do our values play into our responses? How should our values play into our responses? Our new values, created through a democratic process over several years of surveys and interviews a vote by delegates to General Assembly after amendments were suggested and voted on, and then another year of congregational discussion followed by another round of amendments and a final vote by the next General Assembly are those that I read earlier. Centered in love, we value interdependence, generosity, justice, generosity, transformation, and pluralism. Additional words that are in the descriptions include compassion, democratic processes, gratitude, hope, inclusive, accessible, covenant, mutuality, care, and respect. I have to tell you that the people who are talking the loudest right now are not talking about compassion, mutuality, care, and respect. And this is why we don't always listen to those who are talking the loudest. Because we know that our country and its media are politicized in dramatic ways. Some of our media is hugely polarized. But Americans, we are not a country that is divided firmly down the middle into good people and bad people. We're just not. No matter which side of the political divide you are on. Half of us are not good and half of us are not evil, I promise you. That may be what we're hearing from the media, but it's not true. And yet we cannot roll over and let those who speak loudest and most cruelly have the last word. We must hold fast to that which is good. We must support our neighbors who are at risk. We must fight for the Constitution of this country and what it stands for, and we must have hope. I am finding hope in a variety of authors on Substack, chiefly Heather Cox Richardson, who writes Letters from an American, Joyce Vance from Civil Discourse, V. Spihar from Under the Desk News, and other. I find hope from the Queer Youth Collaborative of Clackamas County that met downstairs on Wednesday evening with 10 adults and 8 youth, because it is so important to a bunch of adults in this area that we have a group like that for youth. I'm also finding hope from California Governor Newsom and his Trump-style social media posts that are using a method that Jesus used in a very different context. William Wise, a biblical scholar, wrote a lovely essay called Jesus' Third Way, where he noticed that all those Bible verses that have been used to keep oppressed people in their place, you know, if somebody hits you, turn the other cheek, and if someone demands your coat, give them your cloak as well. Well, he writes that we have been understanding those all wrong. And instead of submission, those actions and instructions are all about trickster subversion, a way of resisting that won't get you thrown to the lions, but will instead make people think and perhaps even embarrass your oppressors and make them think. Sarah, could you do me a favor for a second? Can you trust me, right? Okay, you know that I would never actually hit you, right? Will you come up here for a second? Okay. And so in the time of Jesus, when someone hit you on one cheek, it was a backhanded slap meant to indicate that you were a lower class than they. So if I were going to hit Sarah because somehow in my culture it was acceptable to hit Sarah, it's never acceptable to hit Sarah, I would backhand Sarah on this cheek. Now, I can't use my left hand to do anything like that because my left hand did other things that one does not use that hand in polite company. And so if Sarah turns her other cheek, what does that mean I have to do? Can I backhand Sarah on her right cheek with my right hand? Or on her left cheek? No, I can't. I would have to punch her. And punching her would mean that she was my equal. You don't punch someone who is of a lesser class than you. And so punching someone means that they are your equal. It's kind of tricksterish. Thank you. You aren't better than me is what that action implies. A similar meaning was found with, if someone claims your coat, give him your cloak. Because for many poor people of the day, the only possession they had was their coat. Often it was used for collateral. If you had to borrow something, your coat was what you gave them for collateral. And every lender who was a civilized human being gave it back to you at night so you wouldn't freeze. Okay? So what happens if somebody doesn't give you your coat back? Well, what Jesus suggested was that you give him your undergarment as well. And the reason for that was because nakedness was seen as a bad thing, but it wasn't a reflection of the person who was naked. It was a reflection of the person who caused someone to be naked. And so if someone refuses to give you your coat back and you give him your undergarment as well, and you're walking around and everybody's like, oh my goodness, why are you naked? And you're like, well, that guy took my coat. Oh my goodness, what a terrible person. Gavin Newsom is not running around naked. He isn't fighting WWE matches, but he is playing the trickster. He has adopted Trump's blustery social media style, complete with rude nicknames and all caps style, and signing him with his initials, just like Trump. They're actually very funny. And they are pissing MAGA off. Now again, I do not believe that half the country is evil. And yet I do believe that we are divided and that Democrats are failing to unite in any kind of cohesive way to stop the stripping away of people's constitutional rights, of Medicaid cuts that will cause millions to lose their health insurance, and redistricting that is blatantly illegal. And if trickster humor is what it takes to fight back to keep our values of inclusion and justice and love, so be it. Violence is never the answer, but neither is rolling over. When protesters marching across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in 1965 were brutally beaten by law enforcement on Bloody Sunday, they regrouped. They marched 2 days later with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. They crossed the bridge and they saw law enforcement with tear gas and billy clubs, and they stopped. And they prayed. And they turned around and went back. They didn't walk into the fray until they were organized, until they had support. President Johnson asked them to wait until the court case was heard, but a week later provided National Guard protection for the marchers. I don't know if we could get that support today, but it matters that they did. It matters that the news coverage of Bloody Sunday shocked Congress into doing the right thing and passing the Civil Rights Voting Act that outlawed poll tests and taxes. I might think that photos of children loaded on planes to be returned to another country in the middle of the night would do that, but I guess it takes more to shock us these days. Something you might not know is that Unitarian Universalist ministers answered Dr. King's call to come march in Selma at a rate unheard of in any other denomination. It has been reported that 25% of Unitarian Universalist ministers throughout the country went to Selma. And one of them, the Reverend James Reeb, was killed by Ku Klux Klan members after eating at a lunch counter with a black minister and another white minister. We must rise up for our values of inclusivity and interdependence and compassion, our values of justice and equity and love. They are the house we live in, the walls that we have built and must protect. May it be so, and let the people say amen. Amen.